Welcome to the IR Digital Podcast, a part of IR Global, the largest international professional services network. I'm your host of the IR Digital Podcast, Jennifer Riggins. Today, we're sitting down with Thomas Wheeler, the founder of both the IR Global Community and the Sinchi Foundation, an NGO spinoff from and supported by the community, which supports Indigenous people in their efforts to protect the environment. Tom, for those that don't know you yet, can you briefly introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Jennifer. So, as you've said, I'm the founder of IR Global, an organization set up around about 15 years ago now. Apart from IR, I also have a number of other interests. You've referred, of course, to the Sinchi Foundation, which we're going to be talking about today. But I'm also involved in restaurants, running music labels. So quite diverse, you could say. In a way, I kind of like to describe myself more than anything as some kind of a creative architect. So what I really focus on is building communities, developing concepts, and building the structure for them to thrive.
Okay, yes, that is certainly eclectic, and we share in our passion for nurturing communities, whether intentional or not. Sometimes that just happens. So just briefly, why did you start IR Global? I didn't realize it was even 15 years old already. Wow.
Yeah, well, maybe 14, nearly 15. About 15 years to sort of 16 years ago, I was working in advertising, but working in the legal space and working with both lawyers and also corporate financiers. And it kind of just occurred to me how much money actually was being wasted on advertising. Almost kind of an ego trip for advisors to put the bigger advert next to each other in a magazine. And ultimately thought, well, what kind of client goes about choosing their advisor by an advert? Ultimately, we all know how the world works, and it's through recommendation. You speak to someone you trust and you ask if they can recommend someone. And with this line of thinking, I became very interested in the network model. So what I would say is IR is not a new invention. There were networks which existed before, but I spent a lot of time fact finding and finding out what worked well, what were the problems in other organizations. And I like to think we took the best bits out of all of them, really. And I think, well, I'd like to think it's been proven as well. 15 years on, we're the largest exclusive network of advisors in the world, as you said in the intro. And I think a lot of that has been down to quite a unique approach, which focused on the individual as much as the firm, because we're in a people business and there's lots of great lawyers, lots of great accountants, but far more important is finding people who are like-minded, see the world in the same way. And in our case, that's, in regard to giving or cultivating a giving mentality.
These are definitely relationships based on trust. So it makes sense that you need a network. Also, they aren't necessarily needing to be competitors with the largest ad because they often collaborate together. The members I know of the network tend to tout each other and promote each other because they have specialization in that trust. So they can promote each other, which is a good way about going about the world. So that's nice for that. Thank you.
Just to add on that, I often tell people this story because when the network was first born, you imagine you ring somebody up and you say, do you want to join a network? And they say, well, who else is in it? And there's nobody. So the network grew from nothing, and it grew on a vision. And that vision was about how much you give. And I think it was very different. And it had a kind of a beautiful filtration, because the good guys, the very successful people who have been waiting for something to give back and to develop a community of like-minded people were jumped straight in. And many of them are still members 15 years later. And those who were only focused on what they're going to get out of it, how much was in it for them, they naturally fell away. So the beauty was in its simplicity and the psychology of even the vetting and how people got involved.
And that definitely echoes in your foundation, the Sinchi Foundation, which we're here to talk about today. So talk about what that is, what it's trying to achieve, and how it was developed.
Yeah, well, I think from the very first days of IR, we wanted to make a difference, not just in the business world, but it was always the intention socially to work on social justice and social impact. Of course, in those early years, it was first about developing the global network. And around maybe 6-7 years ago from now, back in around 2015, I decided to launch our own NGO. Now, the NGO is focused on the preservation of the environment, specifically working with Indigenous communities who find themselves on the front line of the climate crisis. We've done projects over the years in all corners of the globe, through Australasia, Asia, multiple places in Africa, South America, North America. So pretty much every continent except for Antarctica. All kinds of different projects where we've supported Indigenous storytellers. We've worked on documentation products, journalist projects, to really on-the-ground actions about defending territories to legal rights.
Why Indigenous people? With all due respect, I think those of us in the global north are much more harmful to the environment. So why do you choose to focus on Indigenous people for this?
Well, I think the thing which probably surprises most people if they don't know already, and this is backed up by science, is that Indigenous people protect and steward over 80% of the world's biodiversity, which is a shocking figure when you consider they make up less than 5% of the global population. So if anyone is serious about making an impact environmentally, it seems pretty obvious that it should be Indigenous people who we're working with. What's more, like if you look at what's happened over the last 10 years, of course, there's been huge amounts of money spent on the environment and the climate crisis, many, many billions, hundreds of billions, but less than 0.15% of that has actually directly reached Indigenous people. So there's obviously something going wrong here when you consider 80% of the world's biodiversity is being protected by Indigenous people, but they receive less than 0.15%. So Sinchi was developed as a platform to direct resources and funds to those who need it most, those who are affected most, but also the most important gatekeepers to the remaining and vital ecosystems left on Earth. Because simply, if we lose ecosystems such as the Amazon, it's not just a problem for the Amazon, it's the whole world. The Amazon affects the weather patterns in North America, in Europe, in Africa. Everything is interconnected, and what happens there is already affecting us here.
Yeah, they're the lungs of the world. Do you get pushback? Why do you think there is that disconnect? Because that is a wild dissonance, like numerically. I'm not very good at maths, but 80% of the biodiversity stewards of the world are Indigenous people, but only less than 1.5% of climate crisis funds go towards them. Why do you think that disconnect happens?
And actually, sorry, much worse than that, 0.15%.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, whew.
So things are slightly changing, but I think there's a few reasons. If I was going to be very, very cynical, and a lot of Indigenous platforms and organizations have talked about this, is, are we actually more interested in saving the economy, or are we more interested in saving, the environment? And I think what shows is that it's been much more about the economy. And I think that's been proven by a lot of these, carbon credit schemes, which have become just financial trading instruments. And probably best we don't talk too much about that at this moment. But, I'm hopeful. Yes, things have gone wrong, but I hopefully will be talking about it more today, but there's, actions which we're doing and other fantastic organizations which are really making a difference. And I think the world is waking up to this now. And it's not just in the, let's say, the NGO world, but I think you'll see this in the media. You see this in the narratives changing. And you see it especially in young people, this desire to learn about Indigenous, not just learn about Indigenous cultures, but to actually learn from Indigenous wisdom, because this wisdom and these knowledge systems are what we need to go back to. This march of progress we're in, or forever march of progress, it's kind of taken us away from what we are. And we're forgetting, in my opinion, that we are nature, rather than it's something separate to us. And this is what we can learn from Indigenous peoples.
Absolutely. How do you decide which guardians or which local charities, Indigenous groups to support with Sinchi?
Well, I think it's almost like doing a business deal, funny enough, because you have to do your due diligence. We obviously I've had a huge number of people contact us over the years, and especially at the beginning, you want to help everybody. And, it can become very daunting and overwhelming even when there's so many challenges and problems and things going on in the world. However, we try and identify where the biggest challenges are, where the biggest impact is possible. To give an example of our kind of flagship project at the moment, I met a Indigenous lawyer. She was actually the first Indigenous lawyer from her region to qualify as a lawyer. And she traveled over as a representative of the Amazon to talk at a major conference in The Hague in the Netherlands. And we met, made an instant connection, carried on talking. In turn, she then introduced me to the Indigenous Council of the whole region, which represents the whole region. Over the course of the last 3-4 years, we've gone from, contacts and partners to collaborators to friends to what is almost family now, where there's a trust and relationship built over time. What is not unique to us, but something which is very important, which I think, and I wish more organizations did, is realize that the answers are actually with the communities. So we don't go over ever explaining how things should be done or with any preconceived ideas. It's about communication, and it's about acting as an ally, rather than sort of going in as some kind of white saviors,
So what would be like an example of something that you've helped achieve or you've facilitated achieving? Like what would be on the ground in the Amazon, for example?
Yeah, to give you something like really tangible, I mean, there's lots of things we could talk about, but really tangible. We run an Access for Justice strategy. And what that means is working on a number of strategic pillars to help the communities on the ground with their land rights and to stop illegal activity and forest crime. So this strategy, these strategic pillars, this starts with demarcation. So within any community or territory, you first have to prove that this is Indigenous land and it needs to go through the justice system. So that's a great first step, but of course it doesn't stop illegal activity. But once it is proven, we then develop and we provide training, which is all Indigenous peer-to-peer. And we provide technology, GPS cameras and markers. So the communities themselves, forest guardians, can go and patrol the territories. And with this information, because of course there's no postcodes in the forest, with the GPS coordinates, they can submit that to the authorities, prove there is illegal actions, they can prove it's in their territory because of the demarcation. And then the third strategic pillar is ensuring that there's very strong relationships built with the right members of the justice system. Of course, in the global south, unfortunately, there are issues of corruption in certain places. So you have to make sure that you work with the right partners to make sure there's accountability and action. So we work with the federal police, or I say we do, the communities work with the federal police and communicate with public prosecutors. And this is proven to be incredibly effective. I mean, our flagship in the Mauro Indigenous Territory, which is 420 square kilometers, they kicked out 8 illegal logging concessions. And this was featured in the last UN report on forest and fauna, which was basically highlighted as a best practice approach to actually stopping forest crime. And this is one of the only areas in the Amazon which has kicked out all of these illegal actors. As a result of that, we're now expanding the model, so it's scalable. And by the end of this year, we'll have 9 different forest guardian groups operating over a region of about 1,500 square kilometers.
Oh, that's impressive and heartwarming and hopeful, but obviously it would benefit from more resources to help scale it more. How can the IR global community, which is kind of the target audience of this, how are they involved? How does it intersect? How can they support?
Well, the IR Global is already doing a great deal. And I'll explain it because it's on multi-layers. The network itself donates a large sum each year to the upkeep of the charity. And this covers to date all of the administration costs. So while a lot of charities or NGOs, a lot of their funds are ate up by their administration, their staff, and so on, this is actually funded by IR Global to this moment, which means when we receive funds from any external partner, that can actually go directly to the ground and make the most impact. Secondly, we have a number of programs. The one we've had running the longest is our one billable hour. As it sounds, very straightforward. We just ask members to donate 1 hour of their time financially. So what they would charge a client for 1 hour's worth of work, and they donate that. And we've created a huge community of members all over the world, part of this program, which has made a huge impact in the lives of the people on the ground there. This has funded the building of a brand new headquarters for the Indigenous Council. Their last one was invaded multiple times by armed opponents in very dangerous situations. So directly from the IR members in this one billable hour program, we built a new secure headquarters, which is now the base of the whole resistance operations of this huge region, almost the size of France in the Amazon. Now, what's really exciting is we have developed very recently other ways members can get involved on a deeper level. The first of which we trialed in a kind of a pilot program, the opportunity for individual IR members to sponsor the formation of new forest guardian groups. I presented this at our annual conference last year in Barcelona, really just almost talking out loud, sharing the idea. And I was blown away that there was kind of like a scrum afterwards and members coming from all sides asking about how they could do it and how they could get involved. And I think within 4 or 5 weeks of that event, we had 6 sponsors who were each donating €5,000 each to the formation of a new Forest Guardians team. This is all kicking off at the moment. There's going to be a great feature article shared soon as well. I'd love all the members to refer to that and learn about not just the project itself, but the actual members and their intentions and why they got involved. Because for me, that's just as inspirational about them really putting their money, their time and their investment into this and realizing the importance beyond business. And I think they're great role models for the rest of the group. In another way, because we realize that's not possible for everybody, because everyone has different financial capabilities, we have also developed a co-sponsorship model where members can co-sponsor the upkeep of different forest guardian units. So we can make sure that they have the funds available for logistics, for security, for meetings with the authorities, and even to have a small conservation fee. So when, if there's teachers and doctors who are patrolling and they can't go to work, then there is a small fee for their families, for them, as they can't work if they're patrolling.
It would be great if they could actually get paid to do those roles, but that's future thinking, hopefully. So what about people that want to support that aren't members of the IR global community? Maybe they're not lawyers or financial advisors or accountants, but they still want to help.
Yeah, well, this is a model. I talked at the beginning about creating models and concepts. This is simply a model which was created for IR Global. This can be incorporated into any type of organization, any kind of association or organization and network on a sort of on a international scale. However, of course, there's many opportunities to support and engage, whether you are an individual, whether you're a company. And I would just say, yes, get in contact if you're interested. I think our approach is we want to move away from this kind of idea of charity. Our approach is talking more about collaboration and partnership, and that's the future. So we want the people who are inspired to make a difference and motivated to come on board, not just as some kind of financial sponsor or donor, but people who really want to engage They want to collaborate, and we can together form a partnership which is meaningful and makes a difference.
Practically, how do they reach out to you if they want to get involved?
Well, they can, of course, go through the website, which is sinchi-foundation.com. They can email me directly, of course, at either thomas@irglobal.com or tom@sinchi-foundation. I'm sure these will all be linked with the podcast, and it's all freely available. And yes, we have a very exciting new platform called the Treesistance coming soon as well.
Please tell us about Treesistance. It should be premiering in about a week or so after this published. So let's give us the hint ahead.
Yeah, it's very, very exciting. It's really an accumulation of all the work we've been doing over the last 6 years, and coming to something which we think is really going to revolutionize this space. It's coming off the back of a merger with another organization based here in the Netherlands. And as a result of this merger and joining our forces together, we're launching this new platform called the Treesistance, which will be the kind of public face of our combined activities. But what's unique about it is, well, apart from the fact that it's Indigenous-led, is that it's really forming disruptive models which can break through. So we talked a bit about the Access for Justice, which was one of them, but also looking at kind of full circle, the renewable energy transition, looking at digital equity and communications, also looking at sustainable economic development. The site will be launched on the 1st of June. So by the time this podcast comes out, everyone will be able to go to it. So please do, treesistance.com. Referring to some of the things I've already said, what is different about this is it's based on collaborative partnerships. We already have some major brands involved, such as Cake Motorbikes, the electric motorbike company. We are also working with the likes of Puberty Media, the world's largest media provider for Gen Z and millennials. So we've got some very powerful allies, an incredible team who's been formed. And in June, we're going to have a 2-week tour of our key partner, Kasiki Dada, who's one of the most famous chiefs of the Amazon, who will be with us in the Netherlands. And actually, we just found out yesterday, we'll also be talking in Glastonbury on one of the main stages, which is pretty cool. And we'll have in Amsterdam 5 different events going on, ranging from an event for the branding and advertising industry to our launch event, which will be streamed actually on World Rainforest Day on June the 22nd, and actually be part of their official program. So if any members hear this, they're in Amsterdam and they would like to come along, drop me a line and we'll see if we can extend an invite.
That's all wonderful. When we were first meeting and planned for this conversation, I had asked you, what does Sinchi mean? Do you want to explain that real quick? Because I think it's a
nice one actually to maybe finish on. So yeah, Sinchi came into existence before even the idea of setting up an NGO. I don't know which came first, I guess chicken or the egg. But I first heard Sinchi in a ceremony. Many years ago, I was deep in the jungle near the Brazil, Bolivian, Peruvian borders, somewhere in this triangle. And I kept hearing this word repeat, Sinchi, Sinchi. And at the time I was doing a dieta, which meant I went into solitude for 8 days. And this word was just echoing around in my mind. And eventually after 8 days and seeing people for the first time in 8 days, I tracked someone down to translate. And they said, it's courage, but not necessarily the courage physically, but more that courage or that strength to stand up for what you believe in, or even more so to stand up against injustices. And I thought it was beautiful. And little did I know, 3 months later, the foundation was born. So they kind of coincided and it felt right. And yeah, to this day, I still love it. I think it's got a beautiful sound and a beautiful meaning.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you to the IR Global community who is sponsoring and supporting and helping Tom in scaling this. We need your help. I know. Thank you to all our listeners. These IR Digital podcasts are meant to be educational resources from experienced lawyers, accountants, and financial advisors, or in this case, our founder, with all extensive knowledge on topics that you as professionals need to know about and we as global citizens need to be involved in for this case. To learn more about IR Digital and its services, please visit irglobal.com. And if you found this episode useful, please consider sharing it within and outside the network. Thank you so much.